Everybody's got the right ones, huh?
I think so. So let's get I'll have a sign-up sheet for this class as soon as they give me the final registration tally. In the meantime, we'll just sign up with a pass around. Who's got a blank sheet of paper that they'll lend me? Would you mind ripping one out? Would you just put the top of it, Religious Studies 331, the date, September 13th, I think, right? Okay, so September 13th. Okay, what should you be doing? I hope you found this thingamajig here. The different, second part of this book, we're going to do the second part of the class. So we're really only reading at this point Nicholson and the legends of the pre-Islamic Arabs, which is what we're doing at the moment, leading up to the birth of the Prophet. You don't mind if I take your head clips out of here, do you? They're going to get in the way here. I can't really handle the book properly. Okay, any questions about where we are at the moment? Issues, problems? I told you we would work out the thing about a paper. What we'll do is have a midterm and a final non-cumulative. And as far as the paper goes, as I told you earlier, research papers are very difficult. Most people don't have any clear idea. I don't have a list of topics to give you. I can't give 30 topics to 30 different people. And usually you only do a good job when you're doing something you're interested in. Often you don't know what you're interested in, so the class is 3/4 or 2/3 over. So everyone's scurrying at the end to do a paper. And it's really kind of counterproductive in a way. Some people buy papers, borrow papers, go to the internet to get papers. Some people actually do work. A good paper needs footnotes, needs research, needs a subject you're interested in. You don't have to pass it by me, but it has something to do with this class, anything to do with this class. But it shouldn't repeat what we're doing in the class. It should be something you did your own research on. So to qualify for all those things, it takes a lot of insight. So my feeling is we have 3 sort of grading areas here, midterm, final, and paper. If you choose to drop one, not after you've done it, you can't drop one before you've done it, I won't penalize you. In other words, I'll mark you on what you hand in to me. As long as I get 2 things from you, I'll reckon that you chose to drop the third one. If you want to drop one of the exams, some people want to concentrate on exams, some people want to concentrate on paper, I can understand that, or do all 3. The advantage of doing all 3, you don't have me as the arbiter between 2 of your grading samples. Plus, if you're only giving me 2, you're agreeing beforehand that I am going to make the choice if you got an A and a B, what you're going to get. If you give me 3, then I got an A and a B, there's no argument. Or a B and a B and an A, you'll probably get a B, you know. So you're going to, that's your decision to make. Officially it's 3. So if you decide to do only 2, that's fine. I'm not going to penalize you. Only you're in my hands. You know, at my mercy. I'm usually pretty merciful, most people think. Yeah, too merciful, as he's saying. But I'm not here to fight with students. I don't have the energy to do that. I'm not interested in huge arguments with people. Life's too short. You know, I'm not a policeman. I don't want to go check out and find if you've stolen your paper someplace. I don't get any thrill out of doing that. I'm not into the you know, finding out if you plagiarized or you didn't. If you're going to do any of those things, just do the exams. Do yourself a favor. If I think you've, you know, taken this paper from somewhere else or bought it or something like that, I probably won't count it anyway. So the exams we're doing right here in class, I know they're valid. So papers, if you're really serious about a paper, do a good job, you'll get a lot out of a paper too. So, yeah, you'll make that choice and say, well, I did this, you know, and that person did less than me and they got a better grade. Hey, if that's your problem, do all 3, please. Don't look at your neighbor. I'm only doing this for your benefit. Don't complain about your neighbor. And also because I get tired of reading a book report from someone and then marking them down and making them feel bad. It's not a book report. Paper is research into a lot of different things you've read, you know, developing your ideas and then, you know, drawing them together in some manner. It's good exercise, very good exercise. But I find a lot of people, really don't have the time for it at the end of the term. Maybe at the beginning they do, but not the end. They're just overwhelmed with a lot of other things. So they run around like maniacs. Do you follow what I'm trying to say? Trying to get this paper done. I'm going to get that paper done. Well, I don't want you to treat my class like that. So I prefer don't bother. Do what you think is right for yourself. But don't be jealous of someone else. If you're going to be jealous of someone else, first of all, you shouldn't care what other people do. It's you do what's best for you. But second thing, then do what that person did. Don't then moan about it afterwards. Any question about that? Anybody that doesn't understand where they stand on that? Any issues? Well, you don't have to decide about these things until you go. Suppose you drop an exam. No, you can't drop an exam that you've taken. Anything you do, I'm going to count. You can't say, oh, I didn't like my grade now, can I drop it and do a paper? No, don't even come and ask me that, because this is not, I'm telling you beforehand, this is not trying to make things easier for you. I'm not trying to make you feel good, I'm just trying to make things better in terms of how you plan a work schedule out. So, this is not, oh, mark my test and I'll see if I want to do a paper. No. No, I'm not doing that. I'll mark the midterms. I'm not going to mark the final and then see if you should do a paper. No. You do a paper because you think you want to do a paper and you've got something good to do a paper on. And you think it'd be valuable experience to do that paper. You follow me? It should be a pure motive. It shouldn't be a what if sort of maybe because of, in placement or something. Is that clear? So it should be totally pure, your own decision, what you do, officially 3. If you only do 2, I'll count it like that, as if you did 3. Because I'll assume you wanted me to weight the exams more, or paper. Frankly, I think you should do all 3. But since I get tired of seeing people do poor jobs on the papers, I feel this is a less penalizing way to go about things. On the other hand, people say, well, I don't want to do all the exams, and that person, did a paper and dropped, so I have to, make it so you can do what you think is right for you. If you are only going to do the midterm and a paper, I'm going to count your attendance more. In other words, I'm going to let you just take the midterm and disappear. You'll be marked down if you don't come. You follow me? So if you don't do the final, okay, I understand that, but you better be here. Now again, you've all heard me say that. I'm warning you on that one. Sure. So I'm not going to look kindly if you just disappear. So I'm going to be taking attendance more after the midterm towards the final than I'm doing it now. But I'm going to have an official thing that I can watch it, and I'm going to pay attention to that. Because I think the course takes place in the classroom, and whatever you do, I want you to take the class. I don't want you to sort of goof off on the class. I could say everyone has to take the final, but then I'm penalizing the people who are writing the paper. So it's a tough thing. It's a way, I think everyone should do the exam. I really do. I think they're good for you, good for the class, good for everybody. But I don't want to be a dictator here. Questions? So you make the decisions, but don't then moan about someone else. Or don't say, oh, I got a B, I should have gotten an A. Well, okay, you should have done all 3. That might have, then maybe you'd have been clearer. If I gave you a B, it's because you had a B and an A, and maybe the second grade was a B and the first grade was an A, and I may have thought you were slipping downhill, and I may have looked at your attendance, and so it ended up as a B. If you want to be sure, believe me, 2 B's and 1 A will not trump 2 A's and 1 B. You follow what I'm saying? Even you could do that equation. If it's 2 A's and a B, you get an A. If it's a B and a C, I have to look at other things, attendance, things like that to decide. But if you want to avoid that, if you want 2 B's and a C, do the paper. But it could turn out you get 1 B and 2 C's. Because you just slapped this paper together like, you didn't give a damn, pardon the expression, you didn't give a hoot, I should rather say, at the end. And that happens. I mean, I understand that. How many have been in that situation? You get in that rush situation at the end, everyone's demanding you do all the work, everyone's doing all the work at the end of the term. That's tough. And in this class, you really wouldn't know what to write about until the end, 2/3 of the way through. And also, I don't want you to write what I'm doing in class. You want to write something, some additional. So that's why I cover that subject now. It's not something you can really explain at the beginning of the class. You now understand it better. Okay, questions on that issue? Everyone understands problems? Okay. And you all understood as far as I may not be teaching the way you may have heard it wherever you were trained, whether you're Christian, Jewish, Muslim, or Buddhist, or Hindu. And I'm going to try to teach it as an academic, but you might say, well, that's not what all academics say. No, that's different opinion everywhere. I hope I'm trying to be rational. Maybe I'm not. Someone said I wander too much. That may be true, but hopefully in the wandering, there's some information that is imparted and is useful in some way. I feel that you have to fill in gaps by wandering. Okay, we were doing the history of the pre-Islamic Arabs. This period, as you may or may not remember, is and was called the Jahiliyyah. You see, we don't really have to get into modern problems in Islam in this course, so we don't really have to argue too much about the modern world, unfortunately. I only want to teach you what most people know about Islam, not whether a given attitude is the right or wrong one in the modern period. That's for theologians and politicians and writers and others to decide. All we want to do is give you some classical background in what Islam was, is, came to be, developed into, and the rest I'll leave for the different enthusiasts on various sides. So Jahiliyyah, everyone agrees. Now, I disagree in one sense. Now you say, now this is not an official Islamic view, this is an academic view, okay? I'm allowed to disagree with something as a human being. I'm not teaching a doctrine here. I can tell you what the Jahiliyyah was, but if you think it means ignorance, I don't agree. I mean, it does mean literally, that's what it means, but I don't think the people at that time were literally ignorant. You see, I think, in fact, a lot of them were quite sophisticated. And that's why the legends of the pre-Islamic Arabs are interesting, because it shows a very sophisticated, cultured, poetic people. And they may have been ignorant of Islam. They may not have known about the Prophet. They may not have known about the ideas that the Prophet has come to, or the angel that is tutoring or dictating to the Prophet has come to reveal, depending on how you see it. But I don't think that they were ignorant. I don't think looking at these legends here in this book, which is why I do it, you would conceive of these people as ignorant. I mean, they're no more ignorant than the people today are ignorant. People who go to watch Steven Spielberg movies, or worse than that, Madonna or somebody. Who? Matrix? I don't even know what that is, but I assume it's something people watch. So they're not any more stupid than any more ignorant than any of those people, or a lot of other things that people do today. So I don't think to call people ignorant makes you feel superior to those people. I don't feel you should have any right to feel superior to anybody at the moment in the world. And certainly not these people here, because they're quite sophisticated in many ways. Again, if you're a believer in a certain religious background, you could say they're ignorant of the religious background that I came to teach, or that I'm involved in that. That's a fair statement. They obviously are ignorant of that. But that doesn't mean they're totally ignorant people. And as I said, I think that they are quite charming, very sophisticated, extremely attractive, and just very interesting people. So, we discussed how the pre-Islamic history, particularly as far as the Jewish penetration goes, as far as the native religion went, usually this was expressed in terms of what scholars nowadays call animism. I don't think that's a very good term for anything. First of all, what is the word? Well, we know what the modern word anima moves into. What does it move into? in our modern vocabulary? Animals. No, yeah, it could be, no, that's animus, but more anima is not the same, but it has to do with animals. And it comes from the Greek anima, soul. It's nothing to do with against. It means soul. In Greek, the anima was your soul. But the Greeks saw the soul as doing what? That's a modern English word, so it's not a Muslim word. So we're talking about academics now, not Muslims. What does the soul do for the Greeks? Huh? It moves. It moved the body. The soul moved the body. So that's why we call animals animals, because animals move. I mean, for the Greek and for the modern person, animals move. They're not tied to the earth like a tree. See, trees can shake, I guess in the wind, they don't even seem to shake themselves. They can grow, but they don't move. They're rooted in the ground. So they're not what? Animals. Animals move. Of course, in the Greek view, they were, had an independent little soul cooking in there. Little atomic reactor or whatever. Little nuclear, energy source. I guess now we'd say cars and things are like that, They keep moving around. What happens finally to these cars that keep moving around? They don't have gasoline, okay, so they run out, but solar battery cars and stuff like that, they keep moving, because the energy is there. So they're like a little animal until the battery runs down or wears out or it's gone. And it happens to animals too, doesn't it? Unfortunately, we don't like to consider it, but all of us are running down the moment we start up. And we're all going to run out eventually, like that little Energizer battery on the TV screen. Sad. I mean, it makes me, I'm closer than you guys. It worries me more than it worries you. And I haven't even solved the problem yet, and I'm half gone. So don't think you're going to solve it by thinking about it. You're not. So you might as well not think about it. Because the closer you get, nothing's been resolved any more than when you were 10 years old. I can assure you that. And I don't think you heard anything from your grandparents or your parents or anyone else who resolved this issue. So I don't know if it helps to think or not think about it, but the point of the matter is that I don't know if anyone who's resolved it, except believers. Maybe. So animals move, they grow, they age, and animus is a thing that moves them. So when we say that animism, we mean that in religious studies or in anthropology, we mean that the attribution of living spirits to inert objects. I know it's strange, but what we would not ordinarily conceive of as living things. I know that's a bit strange, because it should be something that's living, not living. But animism means, for the anthropologist, student of religion, attributing spirits or moving soul to inanimate things. We know that animals have souls, so-called, or moving, something that moves them to move. But attributing it to mountains, rocks, glades, wells, springs, trees. Well, trees, okay, we know trees do live, but in any case, animism did this kind of thing. And that's what we consider the origin of the pre-Islamic Arabs to have been, a form of animism. It still exists in parts of the world. Certainly parts of Africa are still functioning in that way. More outlying districts in even more sophisticated, if you want to use that word, civilizations or cultures. Sure, outlying districts in Southeast Asia, India is still very much moved by that. Indonesia, Central America, even in your own home, you might find people who have these things of spirit world, attributing spirits to natural objects and so on. And that's, to some extent, what the shrine at the Kaaba originally was. many ways to spell that, but I'll do this. This thing here is a rough breathing mark because Arabic, like Greek, but unlike English, has other vowels, other consonants rather, that we don't ordinarily think of in modern Western languages as being consonants. For instance, when you say animal, the Semitic speaker would say there's a click there that starts the It is an actual throat sound that you're making aside from the vowel. It's a click or something in the throat. And for Arabic and Hebrew and other Semitic languages, we group things in Semitic languages, there are two of these. There's a rough and Greek too. Rough breathing sound and smooth breathing sound, they call it. It's hard to often distinguish between the two, but often we really only note in writing the rough breathing sound, but sometimes we will write the smooth breathing sound, like, I don't know if I can get this one right, but I'll try. Quran. It's not rough, not like Kaaba. It's more like, just a slight, they say it's more nasalized. One is an ayin, one is an aleph. Same in Hebrew and other Semitic languages. Not, I don't think, in Persian, but in Greek, yes. So you have these sounds, and if it's in the middle of the word like this and here, we mark them. When we transliterate, this is called transliteration into English or other languages. Actually, the transliteration from Arabic is very precise in scholarly endeavors. You can actually see the way a word is spelled in the original Arabic if you look at the transliteration. Because in Arabic you have long vowels and short vowels. Let's see. I'm not sure I got this right, but let's just take this. I may be wrong here. I think that's a long vowel. So often, there's a name, Hal. That tells you the accent is on the first syllable. It's long, Hal, instead of Halid. If I put the accent here, it would be Halid. It doesn't exist, the word, but anyway. So these marks you see in the books that you might look at, they tell you how to pronounce the word. There shouldn't be any problem because, in fact, it's very clear from the marks how to pronounce the word even in English. Now, if you don't know what the marks mean, it looks like gobbledygook to you. But if you know what the marks mean, I think in this older text he puts a circumflex, sort of a little upside down arrow. But in more modern text, they just put a line over the long vowels. You have three vowels in Arabic, e, and u. Same in Hebrew, same in all Semitic languages. And be careful of my stand there. Oh, watch your foot, don't hit it.
Oh.
Don't hit it. Just, don't hit it. Thank you. Maybe move over a little bit, move that chair over a bit, then you won't hit it. There you go, thanks a lot. Yeah, when you come in late and there's that thing, just watch out so you don't go kick us on. I have to set it all up again. It's functioning. So you have three vowel sounds in Arabic, e, and u. And the bar over all of them makes them a long one. Instead of an a and a, instead of an I and e, instead of an and u. And that's what the long, that's what the mark means. And then these other marks, a comma one way and a backward comma the other way, tells you if it's a rough or smooth breathing zone. So Kaaba is rough. Any questions about that? Yes, this is pretty academic. It's nothing to do with whether you believe or something or not. This is just straight Western academic or even Eastern academic presentation of things you should or might want to know about Islam or the Middle East generally. Going into the Marine Corps or something like that, since most of your activity these days seems to be functioning about that part of the world, you could probably really benefit from a course like this and increase your cultural sensitivity, even if you're going to the Army or the Navy or something like that. In fact, I think this is the kind of course everyone going into these services should take, so they understand the world in which they are looking into, putting it mildly or whatever, because it's very important to know how people feel, what their sensibilities are, what their history is. And to my mind, you couldn't have a better introduction to that sort of thing than a course of this kind. So I think it really is important. Some of our leaders should have studied these things, and they might understand some of the things that they have to understand in the modern world. Okay, you know what I'm saying. I don't have to be more specific than that. Just what the transliteration signs would be a help. They pronounce the words correctly then. That's a real start if they can pronounce the words correctly then. Okay, so the Kaaba, according to academics anyway, maybe not the believers, was originally a pagan shrine. And it was this kind of shrine. There was a black stone there. And so in some sense, whether modern Muslims or pre-Islamic peoples worship the black stone is an open question. Obviously, a modern Muslim wouldn't say that he was worshiping the black stone. But they do go around the black stone, which is still there. And I think anyone, believer or not, would be hard-pressed to tell you why they're going around the black stone. Because it's a survival from pre-Islamic days. It's a survival from the pilgrimage that took place to this ancient shrine. How old it is, I don't think anyone knows. The Muslims will say, and the Koran will assert, that it was put down by Abraham and Ishmael. And that's how old they would say it is. Maybe the structure. But where did they get the stone from? I don't think anyone thinks Abraham and Ishmael put the stone down. And that question, I don't think anyone, maybe there's someone in this room who can answer it better than me, but I'm willing to hear it. But I've never heard an answer, to my mind, that was sufficient to explain it to a modern mind, except that it's a survival from pre-Islamic time, from the Jahiliyyah, and the pilgrimage associated with it has been absorbed, just like Christianity does. Can you name any practices in Christianity that have been absorbed from the pre-Christian past? Well, just about everything. Like, for instance, tasting the body and blood of Christ Jesus. This is a mystery cult religion's phenomenon that you had in Isis, Osiris, Mithra, and all those sorts of religions. Christmas trees, reindeers, Easter eggs, you name it. They're all pagan symbols that have been absorbed, given a new meaning. Fish. Fish was the anima of the living ocean and so on, and the pre-Islamic and the pre-Christian fish. It doesn't mean they're the same world. It's an animistic symbol. So, I mean, it's just, oh, look at the Muslims, they have a black stone, we're superior. No, you're not. You just think you are, because you haven't looked in your own background to any extent and see how much of the pre-Christian world still survives in your own practice that has been absorbed and redefined. I mean, you can't tell me why tasting blood of somebody is going to do anything for you. And in fact, blood was specifically forbidden in the Old Testament to eat or any way come in contact with. So how that has anything to do with the Middle East, I have no idea, and it's forbidden in Islam too. So, it certainly has nothing to do with the Middle East. It's everything to do with the Hellenistic, Mediterranean, pre-Christian mystery world. Nothing to do with the Middle East. So, well, didn't Jesus announce that? I have no idea whether he did or not. These are literary works. And I said, the big problem in literary works is mistaking literature for history. You can think he did this, or Paul may say he did this, but Paul never knew Jesus. Paul writes in Corinthians about this, but he never knew Jesus. never met him, in fact persecuted early Christians. So just because he said it doesn't mean that I personally believe it. And I don't think a Middle Eastern teacher in the framework of what we're talking about would have been teaching that, frankly. So I have no idea, but I'm just trying to say we have these survivals. People can say one thing, but whether it was actually taught or not is something else again. And it may mean something to you now because of the tradition that has been formed on it and all the weight that's been given it, and that's fair enough. So the Kaaba too, there's a black stone there, but what was the black stone originally? By the way, have you ever seen pictures of the Kaaba and the stone? Anyone ever seen the stone close up? Well, you know, it's tied together with ropes. I mean, I've never been there, but I know this much about it, and from descriptions I've read and from pictures that I've sort of partially seen it because it's inside a structure, behind usually a veil of some kind. People do, I think, try to kiss it through the holes that are in the shrine area. Again, I haven't been there, so I can't affirm that. But and there's huge crowds that go there on pilgrimage time, so they're just like, I don't know if you've seen pictures of the Kaaba at Mecca and the huge throngs of people that circumambulate, go around the Kaaba, which is part of the pilgrimage process. You'd have to explain to me why people go around it 7 times. See, that's a pagan number. It's in the Old Testament. It's always in the Old Testament. 7 times 7 for Cain. I will take vengeance. 7 was the key old number that everyone spoke about. This is pre-Jewish, pre-Hebraic, pre-Christian, pre-Islamic past. Why 7, by the way? Why was that so? I know it's weird to think. I mean, I know we have the Sabbath, 7 days of the week, all that. I can't comment on that. But one of the reasons 7 was so important in the ancient world, and I know you won't believe me, but I think it's true, and I have no better explanation for it, is the same reason that people who throw dice today say,
7.
come 7 or 11. Why? Because these ancient soothsayers did have things like dice. I don't know, it's normal to have a little cube and put numbers on it. And the number that most often comes up is what? 7. Why? Because you got 6 sides. You got 6 plus 1, 5 plus 2, 4 plus 3, and vice versa. And so 7 is the number for the ancient soothsayers. That is the most meaningful number because it's the most frequent number that appears. I guess 11 or 12, I don't know which it is. I'm not a great dice player. But that would be one of the rarest combinations anyway. That would be one of the rarest combinations. But anyway, 7 is the old, and soothsayers would do things in front of shrines in any part of the world. And one of the things they would throw, maybe feathers or bones, but certainly they threw dice. And 7 became a mystical number of some kind. Yeah.
Why is the number 6 considered evil?
I have no idea. I have no idea. I didn't even know it was.
Like 3 6s in a
I
row?
have no idea. Oh, well, that's another area. Yeah, well, the problem is, again, I told you that I know you ruminate about these things, but I can't, in an Islam class, answer all those questions. I'm trying to do 7 because it relates to the Kaaba. 666 relates to the apocalypse, which is another area of endeavor of Christian thinking. So you get that from Christian, but that doesn't mean they thought 6 was an evil number. Again, that's another spin you put on it in latter history. 666 was supposed to be the name of the beast in the apocalypse, but it doesn't mean 6 is an evil number. It's just, it's a code for something, and they obviously weren't able to say what they really were talking about, and they seemed to be talking about Nero, from what I understand in those days, who was an enemy of the early Christians, and they had to put a code there to cover up something of what they were talking about. But that's the best explanation I know. Nothing to do with the number 6. Nothing whatever to do with the number 6. They had a code. But anyway, 7 is an important number, particularly in the Old Testament, and as we see now in the pre-Islamic times and so on. And actually, even in Semitic languages, in the number 7 is Sabah or Sheva, and at least in some of the languages, that means to take an oath. So even the word in the ancient language, watch out for that stand there. the word in the ancient language means to take an oath, which is usually related to religious ideas. So even the number 7, taken as a verb in ancient Semitic languages, meant to take an oath. So 7 is important. In any case, that's about circumambulating the Kaaba. You can say, what are you talking about? Circumambulate. It's spelled just like it reads. What does that mean? Walk around. Circumcise, to cut around the object. Circumambulate. Ambulate is to walk around the Kaaba. Circumambulate the Kaaba 7 times. So, but that is a shrine that what we would originally consider to be animistic. You know, in the Old Testament, you had, for instance, how many have read the Old Testament here? Anybody? A few of you? Anyway, you know the old stories. When Yahweh or the Lord or Jehovah or God, whatever you call him, is talking to the Hebrew people, he's talking first of all, well, not first of all, I'll give you the first one in a moment, but normally you see it, he's talking out of a mountain. Mount Sinai, there's a cloud up there, and Moses goes up to the mountain and speaks to God, and God is thundering out of there. That's all animistic, pre-Hebrew, pagan understanding of the deities. Mountain god, basically. We got mountain gods in Peru still, hanging around. People go up to the mountains in the Andes and sacrifice people. They've done from ancient times to propitiate the mountain gods. Those are fertility, nature gods. Moses, another episode which is more even appropriate to what we're talking about. You remember, if you've read Exodus, Moses' first, this isn't in the Koran, I don't think, although there may be some hint of it there. Moses' first encounter with God. Again, I'm not saying this actually happened. This is the story, this is the picture, this is the writing, this is the portrait. Moses' first encounter, I don't want people to think I'm favoring one thing over another. I don't. I know these are portrayed. Moses first encounters God. Where's God speaking out of? A bush. A burning bush, as it's put. Why should he be speaking out of a burning bush? You know, that's again an animistic symbol. Monotheistic, if you want, animistic symbol. What is God supposedly, or what's he pictured, or what's he say to Moses? Moses, here I am, Lord, and so on and so forth. Take off your shoes, for the ground upon which you are standing is holy. Again, very early religious understanding of the universe, even in, for instance, all Muslim mosques. When you go in, you take off your shoes, even today, you know, because the ground upon which you are standing is holy. I don't think it's so much in, if you went out to Polynesia, if you were in Tahiti, I don't think you necessarily find that. People take off their shoes. I think it's pretty Middle Eastern, actually, to take off your shoes, because the ground on which you were standing is holy. I don't even think the Jews do it very much anymore, although they do say you can't wear a certain kind of shoes because of the composition of them. And so I know that on their fast day, what they call Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, that's coming up not too distant future, the religious Jews wear special shoes. I forget what the requirements are, but they wear special shoes. I think they can't wear leather. They can't wear leather, that's what it comes down to. They can't wear animal substance. So it's just like taking off your shoes, wearing a slipper or something. It's just like, you know, so there too, it's a holy day, you take off your shoes. So this is pretty Middle Eastern, I think you would agree, yeah? So let's go back to, so this black stone, by the way, it's broken, that's why it's got ropes around it. I don't know if I mentioned this, broken. How did it get broken? Well, in the conflicts over time between different groups in Islam, like you have at the present time between Sunnis and Shiites and so on, and arguments about this. At one point, the stone was dragged away from the Kaaba by one sectarian group, and then they fought over it, and it was out in the desert someplace, and in the fighting it got broken, and it was dragged back by another group. And so then it was tied up with ropes to put it back together again, and I think that's how it is at the present time. Again, I haven't been there, but I think that's an accurate picture of the situation. And that would have been broken in struggles between different groups, probably I think around 1100s or so, maybe 900, 1000, somewhere in this period in the Arabian Peninsula, when not between pagans and non-pagans, between different Islamic groups that were in opposition to each other and in contention with each other for control of the Kaaba and the stone and so on and so forth. It got broken in these fights. So it is broken even at the moment. But again, you can say Abraham and Ishmael built the Kaaba. We'll talk about that when we talk about the Koran. But you can't really say Abraham and Isaac or Ishmael or whoever you think is involved in this process put the stone down there. And what does the stone symbolize? I don't think there probably are stories to tell you what it symbolizes, but to my mind, it goes back to pre-Islamic religious practice. And Mecca was a pre-Islamic religious shrine. Certainly it wasn't the only one. It was one of the pre-Islamic religious shrines in the Arabian Peninsula. Now, I drew a map for you earlier of the Arabian Peninsula. Not a very good map, but it'll do. And you see, what was the original name for that? Guess what? So I can pronounce that easy in English because I see it's Jazir Arab, and I know by the accent it's a long I, Jazir Arab, which means what in Arabic? The island of the Arabs. The island of the Arabs. It's a way in Arabic or other languages related to it of expressing what we would call in English what? Peninsula. For them, and I think that's right. A peninsula looks more or less like an island. In fact, if you haven't got a good explorer, it could be considered to be an island. So, it's a word for peninsula. But the island of the Arabs, where the Arabs came out, the Jaziratul Arab, the island of the Arabs. And that's what we would call the Arabian Peninsula. At the moment, we're talking about the Arabian Peninsula because this is where it all began for the Islamic religion anyway. There's no point talking about Afghanistan. There's no point talking about Jakarta, Indonesia. There's no point talking about Nigeria. I mean, those are all interesting places, and I think their culture is worthy of study. But in Islam begins on the Jaziratul Arab. And that's why we're focusing on it. You've got to focus someplace. I can be talking about Turkish development of Islam, and then I would talk about the Turks and Central Asia and what they were before the Muslims came and what kind of Muslim teachers went out there and so on. But, that's not what all Muslims know. What we can do in this class is tell you what all Muslims know and recognize as their prehistory. You can't go into the history of every given cultural group, whether on the Indian subcontinent or the African continent or North Africa. You follow me? Egypt. We could do Egypt, but that's a huge course all in itself. So this is Islam, and why focus on the Arabs? Because Muhammad, as I told you, was an Arab and came out of the Arabian Peninsula, and that's where Islam came. So we look upon the Arab Peninsula to some greater extent than we would ordinarily. So, okay, the religion then of the pre-Islamic Arabs. They had some different gods and goddesses that are mentioned in these stories. I think you can see them in Nicholson, Al-Manat, Al-Uzza. One may have been a moon god or goddess. I'm not sure what the shrine originally in Mecca was. I think he talks about it in some of these portions that I hope you're reading here out of this collection that I've given you. And as I said, the collection is in the bookstore. That's what it looks like. So it's there. So if you don't get it, that's your own problem. I can't be responsible for it if you don't get it. It's instead of the textbooks. I know a book is more impressive, but I'm trying to save you a little money. So they had these early deities of different kinds, again associated with different places. And aside from that, in the Arabian Peninsula, you had the Arabs. Now, the Arabs, as I told you, first seemed to appear in literary history outside the Arabian Peninsula because there was no writing that we know of in the Arabian Peninsula at this time. There may have been some writing in southern Arabia, then known as Saba, now called Yemen. What we call in the Bible Sheba. There may have been some writing down there, and there are ancient inscriptions, which the Muslims don't particularly like, actually. They try to often destroy or erase them, because they don't like things that came before Islam in this area. And modern archaeologists try to go down there and find them in some of the cities of the pre-Islamic Arabian Peninsula, because they're interested in ancient culture. You know, some fundamentalists destroyed those statues out in Afghanistan. I guess it was called in Bamia, those statues of the Buddha, because they don't like idolatry or that kind of attitude, which is up to them. But most people who care about ancient cultures were horrified by that because academics, anyway, and anthropologists and archaeologists and people of that kind, historians, like to study ancient cultures. So they don't like to erase the marks of ancient cultures. It's the difference between an academic, let's say, and someone who believes. All right, so we have the Arab, what we would now call a Bedouin. Now, as I told you, Arabs live more in cities. It's the Bedouin who are more like the pre-Islamic Arabs. And even in classical Islam, when someone wanted to learn the real Arabic, they would go out to the Bedouin tribes and live, because they all thought that it was among the Bedouin tribes that you got the pure Arabic, the oral, transmitted Arabic, not the literary Arabic of the cities. So the Bedouins have always been recognized as the original Arabs. In any case, we don't have a true good picture of them, though the Bible, I think, is giving the picture of Abraham much like a Bedouin. Yeah?
How do you spell that? Bedouin?
There are many ways, but I just do it the way the Arabs do it. And that's a plural in Arabic. Bedouin is singular, Bedouin is plural. But it doesn't matter. We, in English, say Bedouin, meaning a group, plural group. But we take it as a singular. Sometimes you see it with an OU. In any event, the Bible, that many of you are familiar with, the Abraham stories, Isaac, and so on, Ishmael for the Arabs, Jacob, etc., Esau, these people, they're tribal, aren't they? What period is being supposedly pictured in the Hebrew Bible, for instance? What's the time frame of those early stories? 2000 BC? Well, 2500 BC at the sort of outset, some of them 1600 BC. Most of them think the Joseph story is around 1600 BC. Even though the Abraham story is maybe 2400 BC. You know, a good 3,000 years before Islam anyway. Or 3,000 years anyway, 2,500 years, depending on how you want to look at that. They're like Bedouin. They have tribes. They're very interested in their tribal origins and their connections to tribes. In their blood relationships, I don't mean eating blood and drinking blood, which is totally outside the pale in the Middle East. It's only acceptable in the Greco-Hellenistic Roman world, and Christianity as a product of that. In Islam and Judaism is totally forbidden. Couldn't drink blood in either of those religions, or even symbolically do it. I would be considered utterly pagan. Forget that. Blood relations were important. And as the Bible shows the Cain and Abel story, how many are familiar with that story? Cain slays Abel, and it says, and the blood of Abel was crying out from the ground. And then, blood vengeance comes into the equation rather, and then God intervenes supposedly and says, if anyone touches Cain, because Cain's punishment, as I already told you, is more than he can bear, I will take 7 times vengeance for Cain. And then other stories in Genesis, which are very old traditions in the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible, Hebrew Bible. You have Noah shown as making a sacrifice, and God tells him to pour the blood out on the ground, because the blood, you shall not eat. The blood, the life of the animal is in the blood. And then there's something to do with blood vengeance there too. Some comment made, I can't remember exactly what it is, but if you read the Noah story precisely, there's some comment about blood vengeance. Blood requires blood, and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, that still goes through large parts of this part of the world and other parts of the world. Blood vengeance we'll talk about. Okay, so the tribal structure was very important. Now, people like T.E. Lawrence, do you know who T.E. Lawrence was? He's the Lawrence of Arabia, who really was very interested in Islamic or in Arab tribal history, and got into the history through the First World War and became very famous for leading Arab armies against the Turks. But he was a British agent, of course, but he got very famous for an American newsman, and you might see the film Seven Pillars of Wisdom, Lawrence of Arabia, where he's actually, his life is, it's portrayed. It's a pretty pathetic picture of his life. It's not really accurate. It's somewhat accurate. Lawrence was about this big, and Peter O'Toole was about this big, stark, and all the inaccuracies, you gotta move on from there. It's totally inaccurate movie. But anyway, be that as it may, it gives you some picture. And most people get their only picture of things through movies now, I guess. In any event, he thought that the Arab Bedouin were like the Hebrew tribes. But as more modern scholars have come along, a very famous archaeologist by the name of Albright, and others succeeding him, who insisted that, in fact, the Hebrews were a donkey people. I know, donkey people, that sounds like an insult, because we don't really like donkeys. We think donkeys are dumb, dirty animals. But the Arabs were a camel people. Now the Hebrews are portrayed as having camels in the Old Testament. But modern scholars say that's an anachronism. What does anachronism mean? Something that actually didn't exist but is read back in time. Hey, we're going to get our vocabulary lifted up here, if nothing else. Anachronism. Something that's read back, didn't exist at that time, or actually, it came later, but it's read back early. Scholars say, and this seems to be the appearance of Arabs, that camels were not domesticated until about 1000 BC. And that the Hebrew tribesmen were not camel caravanners. But the old texts say that what existed then were donkey caravans. And those are the caravans that went between Mesopotamia, Iraq, the Fertile Crescent, and Egypt, and those places where Hebrews developed, if you want to call it that. And there's a term for them in the ancient manuscripts, Apiru, which we have from ancient texts of that period. And these people are outsiders, outcasts, who are involved in the donkey caravan trade. Now, what does that mean, the donkey caravan trade? Well, donkeys can't go into the deep desert. Donkeys have to stay near the coastline because they can't exist without water, nor can horses for that matter, for any length of time. I don't even know what the length of time is, but probably not more than a day. So they have to always be near sources of water where camels can go into the deep desert. So to domesticate a camel made it possible to go into the deep desert. So whatever Arabs are, they're somehow associated with camels. I know it's ridiculous, but that's how scholars do things. And do I think camels were only domesticated in 1000 BC? I just don't know. I really don't believe that, but that's what they say. They have no evidence for it earlier than that. And the earlier, so modern scholars began to say the difference between Arabs and Hebrews was just the difference between a donkey and a camel. Because they had to stick near the settled coastlines. So you know, you've heard of the Fertile Crescent? The area that goes from Palestine, around through Syria, over to Iraq. All that has to do with the big rivers, the water coming down from the mountains of Lebanon into the back areas around Damascus and so on. They would have to stick to those areas. They couldn't go out into the Arabian wilderness with donkeys, not even themselves. How are they going to go? If you walk 50 miles out, you're dead. You don't have a Jeep. The only thing that can save you in a situation like that is a camel. So in some sense, Arab culture is predicated, according to the scholars, whether it's right or not, on the camel. And some people actually, I think Nicholson even says in his book, that the Arab is the tick of the camel. That the Arab is the tick of the camel. What does he mean by saying the Arab, or others have said it for him, the Arab is the tick of the camel? I don't mean tick-tock. I mean tick instead in terms of a parasite. A creature that lives off another creature. You see, actually, in American culture, the Plains Indians didn't always exist on the American plains. Most Indians existed in, like, up by Minnesota, Maine, along the coast, southern swamps, so on, but not in the plains. What did you really need to make life tenable in the plains? A horse. But why did you need a horse? That, but you needed to chase the buffalo. You couldn't chase the buffalo without a horse. You couldn't chase the buffalo on foot. And you see, you can say the Plains Indians lived off the buffalo. I don't know if you ever thought of it, but it's true. They did everything from the buffalo. They used its skins for tents, sinews for bows, its milk, everything was related to the buffalo. Not all Indians, the Plains Indians I'm talking about. And they really weren't out there until the Spanish came. Because the Spanish brought the horses to Mexico and other places, and the horses escaped and began to, thrive to some extent. Some maybe have been traded, and herds of horses developed, and then they learned how to domesticate the horse, and then they could chase the buffalo. And maybe settlers with wagons as well. They could chase the buffalo, and the U.S. cavalry and others maybe. But you could say the American Indian, Plains Indian, was the tick of the buffalo. He lived totally off the buffalo. He didn't farm. And he moved where the buffalo moved. Where the herds of buffalo moved, he moved. Or she moved. Am I boring you too much here? I apologize. But this is stuff most people don't know about. But I've never thought about it. Same with the Arab. So Nicholson will tell you, he used the same thing. He used its skins for tents. He used its sinews for bowstrings and rope. He used its urine for hair tonic, maybe. He would use its dung for fuel, burn it in campfires. Milk, of course. Meat, if you want to slaughter one. They even say that when you're really thirsty in the desert, you could stick a stick down the camel's throat and make it barf up water. If you're really at death's door or at end of your tether and stuff like that. So Nicholson, I think, describes this very well, which is why I think you should read Nicholson. He's really good on this stuff. So, but that meant that the nomads were nomads, because what did they have to do? They had to follow the grazing. They had to go where the grazing things were. And I guess you could have lived in the desert as long as you could follow the grazing without the camel, if you had sheep and goats. But again, I don't know how far into the desert they could go, because you had to go where pasture was and stuff like that. And I don't know, you had to be near wells. So this Mecca place is a shrine near a well. It's not really a big well or anything. That well, by the way, in Islamic tradition is called Zamzam. Zamzam. And pilgrims who go on the Kaaba go and take water from the well off and bottle it and take it home with them. Well, water from, like holy water from the Vatican or someplace, water from the well of Zamzam. So the camel, the Bedouin Arab depended on the camel, and most of the stories revolve around the camel and things like that. The poetry revolves around the camel. We'll do the poetry in the second part of the class over the other culture of the Islamic world, pre-Islamic Bedouin Arab poetry, which is very interesting. See, I like pre-Islamic society, as you see. I find it really fascinating, and I'm not like a Muslim in that regard. I find it interesting. Maybe they don't. But again, this is not just from the point of view of what someone who's a believer thinks. It's from what an academic might think is relevant. But then comes, for the Bedouin, there is no settled place. You follow the flocks, and the flocks have to do with the climate and the rainfall and where there's grazing. And I'm not a big expert, but there's summer grazing and there's winter grazing, and you have to move according to where the flocks go. Your life is not attuned to a settled place like a village. Your life is attuned to the needs of the animals. That's the same with the American Plains Indians. They would go on sledges, they would move their villages, they could pack them up, move them, take them with them wherever they went with their whole families and everything. Same with the Bedouin in the desert. So I think that the difference with that and the Hebrews is, the Hebrews, I don't necessarily say the Hebrews were dummy people. I'm not sure there weren't camels back then. I don't believe in modern scholarly view of all that. But I mean, sure, the Hebrews did stick closer to the coastlines. Probably didn't go into the deep desert. But other than that, they're pretty similar in their emphasis on tribal life. So what was the glue in the ancient period? What held the people together? As I told you, and I don't want to move fast, I'm sorry to take all this time, but this gets you into it anyway. We can get into the Koran and read the Koran, and by the midterm, we will read the whole Koran, so don't worry, we will get there. What was the glue that held everything together? Blood. What is the tie in the desert, as in the Cain story? Even though there are no other people, when Cain slays Abel and he's condemned and he says to God, my punishment is more than I can bear, I'm an outcast, anyone who comes upon me can kill me. Where are all these other people? The biblical narrator is not so interested in that issue, how the other people suddenly appeared. But the point there is that that's a typical story about an outcast. Anyone who comes upon me can kill me. Who is my protector? What was your protection in the desert? What is your protection in the barrio or in the inner city or wherever? Your gang or something, as I told you previously. Anyone can come upon me, can kill me, or that's what happened to some extent maybe in New Orleans. I don't know the whole story there, but people now say there was lawlessness for a while. I don't know if it's exaggerated or not. My wife thinks it is. I'm not sure. But the point of the matter is you need protection. And if there's no other protecting thing, then it's the blood tie. And the thing that protects you in the blood tie is blood vengeance. So if someone hurts you, your relatives hurt that other person. That's the same in the inner city or someplace today. And if someone kills you, they take vengeance on that other person and kill one of their people. Or maybe, as the story we're going to read here, the War of Bassus. How many looked at that? One of the leaders say, I only took vengeance for so-and-so's what? Shoelace. When I killed this chap here, you were only worth my relative's shoelace. I want 100 more people. He was worth 100 of you. I want 100, not just one. But let me tell you, in parts of the world where blood vengeance is operative, it sounds violent, but it's a very effective deterrent to violence. Nobody does violence often, except maybe the modern terrorist situation. I can't comment on that. But in normal times, people were very loath to do violence because they didn't depend on police force to deal with it afterwards. It was settled personally. And everyone knew retribution was coming. And the social group or tribe didn't like that happening. And they were not happy if someone within their group did something like that. So actually, some of these places in the old days where this is operative, southern Italy, for instance, other places like that, maybe Latin America to some extent. It wasn't just the Arabs that took blood vengeance or the Hebrews, it was the Greeks and others. You could walk around these kinds of cities any time of the day or night, no one would lay a finger on you. It's totally nonviolent in their daily life because they knew that any violence would be operative. Now, if you were a foreigner, it didn't operate for you. You didn't have any what? Protection. I'll tell you more about this after break. Give me 5 more minutes, I'll let you go. In the classical Islamic or pre-Arab time, pre-Islamic time, even the Bedouin culture today, 3 days was what an outsider was given before he was open to physical violence or something like that. You had to, law of hospitality operated for 3 days. And for instance, I lived in the Middle East a lot, and I would go into cafes and different places, and I knew I was totally safe because the minute I sat down and broke bread or drank coffee with that person, he was obliged to protect me. I knew he was obliged to protect me. He knew he was obliged to protect me. There was an unwritten law. Of course, if he didn't want me to have coffee with him and he didn't give me anything, he wasn't obliged to do anything. So often they would shun you or something like that, but if the person sat down with you and drank or broke bread with you or whatever, you were under his protection. And no harm would come to you without that person's honor being in somehow besmirched. Now, nowadays with beheadings and stuff, that may not be so operative, but that's the way it used to be, and classically it always was. But within the other issue, the people who really lived there, not the foreigners, it was the tribe. So blood called for blood, so the blood ties were all important. So therefore genealogies were kept. Why are the genealogies so important in the Old Testament and to the Arab, Bedouin, and so on? Because it was the tribal relationships and your relationship to the tribe that guaranteed your existence and your protection. So the blood relationships were all important to these people and have been up to the present time almost. I think it's very operative across large parts of the Middle East even today. The blood tie is extremely important. So that comes out of the Bedouin prehistoric past, because some people have compared the desert to an ocean and the camel on the desert to a ship where there are no ties to bind you, no settled places, no villages, no maybe wells, but that's about it. So what operates? Well, one Arab historian said what was operating here was asabiya. I want you to remember that word. There's an I in the beginning. Asabiya. What the best translation in English of that word is group solidarity. The Arab historian who wrote about these things and interpreted all Islamic history that he knew was Ibn Khaldun. Look, got put there so you know it's Ibn Khaldun instead of Ibn Khaldun. Khaldun. And the accent tells you where to put the stress and how long the vowel is. What did Ibn Khaldun said? Everything has to do with solidarity, group solidarity. And asabiya, you're feeling for family, kinsmen, tribesmen, and the strength of that feeling. Again, I want to hurry up and just quickly do the modern parallel. Do we have asabiya in America today? To some extent. I try to illustrate to my classes over the period that I've been here in Southern California and elsewhere, what's the loyalty of a modern American normally? Well, he doesn't have many loyalties, but some he has. Usually it's centered in most places around this country in the high school. And you get all kinds of pictures of the football games at night, and they have, what was the latest movie made about that? About some coach. What was it called?
Friday Night.
Friday Night Lights or something like that. Yeah, like that the whole town is basically riveted on that. Well, that's a kind of asabiya, group solidarity. And most people are riveted on their high schools or something. Colleges try to get feeling for the college going. Cal State doesn't have a good record in that. But what schools do have a good record in that? Oh, places like Stanford, USC, Harvard, Yale, Princeton. Why? Because if they can get the asabiya going, the feeling of kinship with your fellow classmates in that particular world, and that goes to your life. Your business contacts develop, and they can also get the contributions from you later. It's mainly giving to the university. People say, well, what's giving to the university help? Giving to the university, how does it help? It makes that university that much better in people's eyes, because it tells the world that you cared about that place. You see, when all of us here at Cal State, we say, we've got to go on, we're just using it and so on, I don't want to give any. Yeah, but you're losing by that. If you can afford to give something, you should give something, because others are giving something, and it makes people look upon their education as more valuable than yours. I know it's dumb, I know it's stupid, but that's how people think. And it's as the attachment, the asabiya people feel to where they went, that gives it the power. That gives it, why is Yale so powerful? Who are these jerks that go to Yale? Who's George Bush? What do we care about their dumb honor societies? Why are all the Supreme Court justices, everyone else, the CIA, everything else, why are they all from Yale? Why did Clinton go to Yale, and so on and so on? Why did Miss Clinton go to Yale? Asabiya. The place is a pit. It's just a slum. It's nothing. It's just what people think. Oxford, Cambridge, what people think. And it's the asabiya people feel in that environment that make it important. So that's something. So in our world, it's usually the high school, the college. Sometimes it's the business enterprise in Japan, like the different businesses and so on. Where your groups are, where your loyalties are, where your feeling of kinship is, where your feeling of fellow feeling is. Talk more next time, and we'll move on from there. Thanks for putting up with me. We'll get somewhere, don't worry. I just want to get through this and on to the next stage. Tell you who the prophet is.